Thank you everybody for coming. My name is Devin. I'm from Better Cloud. I'm joined by Harit from Better Cloud. Thanks for coming to a special edition webinar for August series, Why the F Isn't This Automated Yet? What we'll be talking about today, we'll be talking about a lot of SaaS automation and SaaS ops automation. For those, I know we have some Better Cloud power users in the audience, some who may just be new, some are prospecting it, some may have never even used our tool before. What I mean by SaaS ops and automation is we're talking about the orchestration of events between all of our best in breed applications that live in the cloud. And we're going to be discussing today a lot of our strategies and how-tos and things that we have seen in the field today. So before we kind of jump into the meat and potatoes of our presentation, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. First of all, we'll be recording this webinar and having it available and posted. So if you need to drop for whatever reason, don't worry, we got your back. You'll be able to review this recording in its entirety shortly after we are done. If you have any questions, what we have in Zoom, we have a Q&A feature that's open. We prefer that if you ask questions through there. We also have the Zoom chat. I'll check that too, but please use the Q&A feature if you can. And what we'll do is we'll do our presentation and leave some time at the end of today's presentation to go through your questions. And then if we run out of time to not be able to answer everybody's questions, please feel free to join us in Better IT. It's our Slack community for IT professionals everywhere. I'm not talking about just Better Cloud, but we have a workflows channel where we'll be discussing and following up with any users live on automations there. So if we run out of time, please continue your discussion. So who am I? My name is Devin Domingo. I work on the implementation team here on what's called the Expert Advisory Group at Better Cloud. My background's in IT. I've been in IT for about 10 years. And what I'm doing today on a day-to-day basis is I meet with our customers and learn about their IT environments and learn for opportunities of how we could connect SaaS applications all together. So I've been partnering with tens to even probably about 100 different customers at this point. And I've seen the many different environments. I've learned a lot of different things about your processes. And I'm just really excited to be here and share some of what I've heard from the field. And I'll let Harit introduce himself.
Thanks, Devin. Hey guys, I'm Harit Patel, part of the product management team at Better Cloud. And prior to Better Cloud, I was part of the Workspace ONE product team at VMware, heavily involved with cross-platform, cross-technology alignments with Apple, Google, Microsoft, BlackBerry when it comes to mobile device management. And prior to moving to product, I was also had the privilege of managing a global support organization and a global TAM organization at AirWatch, spending my time across continents from Spain to Singapore and helping expand their footprints in the APAC region. But I actually just realized, Devin, I completed a year at Better Cloud. That's exciting. So glad to be here and sharing some ideas and thoughts around automation. So moving on to the next slide. Kind of wanted to set the tone and talk about some of the questions that we had up in our website webinar registration and talk about those first. Why and what could we automate? Let's say there are so many things that we can start automating, but let's picture a time back in the 1800s when carts were being pulled by horses. If we had asked people, what can we do to improve mode of transportation? The first thing that people would have come up with is make horses faster. No one would have thought of the idea of a car or a self-driving car like Tesla. That was unthinkable. Similarly, when we think about SaaS applications, people typically think about automating processes within an application. People sometimes rarely miss out on the automation capabilities across applications, and that's some of the things we want to talk about. There are so many monotonous tasks that can be cleared off of your plate. And those are some of the things we'll touch in as well. The last one is how can we create great day one user experiences? The idea of us living in this current world that we live in today with so many people using digital applications, being remote, it's more critical than ever to allow them and give them the opportunity to use these applications seamlessly in a more digital and tech savvy world. Making the day one experience more simpler and easier. And that's some of the things we're going to touch on. So before we jump into some of those discussions, questions, and at the end, we'll open it up for questions as well. I kind of want to take a Zoom poll and see what the audience is currently at. So I'm launching my first Zoom poll. There you go. So the question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel you have automated business processes to the best that can be? 1 being entirely manual, and 10 being lift a finger. I don't have to lift a finger at work. So I'm seeing some responses come in. We're at 45, 50% of the votes. And this is a pretty interesting feedback. I'll give it 1 more second. And okay, I'm gonna end the poll. And I'll share the results quickly to see that everyone's kind of all over the board. And I'm seeing that number 3, 4, and 5 are kind of leading the pack. So this is a great audience. I think we'll also present this poll as another option at the very end. And I want to kind of see if it changes your perspective and things that you have identified that you could start automating. There was another poll question I wanted to kind of ask. So we talk about wins. When we talk about automation, what are some of the best wins that you feel you could get out of automation? So there are different types of automation, but what are the wins that you feel would be the best when it comes to automation? So it spans from efficiency, standardizing process, less manual work, and we put in a fun one in there talking about more socially distanced beach time. So we're at 57%, 70%, and I'll give it 5 more seconds. But this is pretty interesting. I'll end the poll and hand it over to you, Devin.
Cool. I'm whoever that one person that answered more socially distanced beach chime. I am right there with you. So let's move on to what's going to be our first question. I like this idea though of like standardizing process and less manual work efficiency. I'm seeing like a nice evenness around the poll, and I think everybody understand those core tenets, but that beach time I think is most important. But anyway, let's talk about even just like early days, like kind of Harit, what was your first automation project that you felt like, kind of got you into this world?
So I was one of those kids that typically loved breaking things and putting them back together. And I think my parents kind of prided themselves in saying my kid can break things and put that together in terms of like electronics. So in that realm, my first automation project was creating a Lego automation, like a car that was automated. I could do a few things to the car, and things would go off, like a siren would go off, and a couple of different things. So that was a fun automation project back in the day. However, if I think of something in the SaaS world or in the application world, one of my first automation projects was focused on Jira, helping create a global process, making sure that bugs and tickets that were raised were tying back properly into our engineering resources, making sure they were leveraging things in Jira like labels, priorities, custom fields, helping reduce the time to looking at those new things, and also raising concerns more efficiently and more quickly within the engineering organization. So that was my first automation project.
Yeah, I'd say for me, I didn't even like think of the like home robotics kits. Like I remember having one of those as a kid and just like, and like I remember getting frustrated with it, but I was also the type of person that would like break things and like put them back together and see if they still worked. And now here I am like later in life just doing that for a living. But I'd say what's going on, like the one that I think recall in like my IT career that really kind of propelled me into doing automation work, especially with Better Cloud, was in my last job. I was a service desk manager for a smart cities company. And I had this task of, managing a team of like 13 different service desk engineers, and, people were assigned to different projects. And it kind of like your example is like, hey, I have all these different teams that need to solve different tickets. So I was using a software at the time, Zendesk, to try to figure out, hey, what's in their built-in automation suite that could automatically assign tickets, because I knew as part of my day-to-day work, I was never going to have time to assign tickets. So I figured out ways how to build in all these triggers and automations just based off the different channels of incoming tickets to figure out how those tickets are going to be ultimately auto-assigned. And I, continue to just kind of work in this process, and I started learning about webhooks and ways how to make outgoing API calls. And I was like, you know what? Like, I really do like this part of my job. And now I am here at Better Cloud helping other folks learn about how to do this with other systems. So yeah, that was my first big project, I'd say.
So that's interesting. So when you started thinking about your first automation project, like what are some practical ways that you kind of kickstarted it, or can you share some ideas on how people can start learning those SaaS automations or help with automation?
Yeah, so I'd say in my case, like, and this is something that I learned in like coding boot camps and programming classes, it's like literally the first step you have to do is just write out your checklist of things that you do in a normal process. Literally everything from like, where do I click on a screen to what am I writing in this email? And from there, you could start to identify trends in your process and try to figure out, wait a second, there's all these tools that may even be built into my platforms that are native and I could already be using. So like examples of Better Cloud templates already gives you suggestions of that. Zendesk had this concept of like triggers and automations and all these help center articles that could get you started on that process of automation. And then as I started kind of working through this practice of trying to, you know, throw some stuff at a wall and see what sticks, of what out of my manual process I could finally automate, I learned I was like, wait, I can't do this all on my own. So I started turning to other resources like help forums, Stack Overflow, Google, and for when it comes to Better Cloud, things like Better IT, to just start to get ideas from other professionals in the same space and try to get an idea, hey, have you automated and solved this problem before? And you know what's cool is when you're in the SaaS world, you start to use a lot of the same tools. So you do start to hear of a lot of similar stories and could compare your use case to your colleagues' use cases. And then from there, it's like you'll notice that a lot of these wheels have already actually been invented. It's just a matter of you being the person who's going to orchestrate and kind of tie all that into your own process and smooth it all over together. And then, you know, one thing that's cool about even just like Better Cloud and automation is the group that I come with, we're you know, we do these like free consultations sometimes with customers that we call like our office hours. So sometimes it just helps to talk to like a consultant or somebody who's like done this work before in the industry, just because they have that context of solving this problem for hundreds of other customers, or even course material writers. Like I know if they've seen those problems too. So getting certified, even just learning and speaking with those experts, I think is really what really kind of gets you into the right direction, and ultimately helps you solve these and learn more about these automation problems in SaaS.
No, I think
What would you say
that,
was for you?
that's insightful. I think one of my primary things would be I love to identify places where I'm doing the same process again and again, kind of like identifying things that happen consistently. And then I kind of dive into checking if there's technology available to what you mentioned. Like there could be things within the same application, or there could be tools out there that help me bridge those together. Outside of the work side of things, I use this app called IFT that helps me automate so many things, tying into applications, turning on my lights, turning off my lights. So when I think of all of those, and I look at work automations, I primarily look at APIs and see how I can leverage those. I'm not the smartest when it comes to being a developer, but I do find myself being slightly technical to read through those documents. However, I like the idea of you mentioning that relying on your resources, peers, colleagues is a great place to start. Because when we think of a community that helps us learn about new things or spur new ideas that we haven't even thought about. I think templates was also a good point you made. That was the actual core idea behind why we released templates from Better Cloud, making sure that we took in some of the recommendations that we heard from our customers and making them available as readily available templates so you can like kickstart your automations. They're definitely not the best full-on automations out there, but it gives you those ideas to dive in. I think I use some of those as well. One of the things we're working on from a product standpoint is once you start customizing those templates, we want to make sure that you're able to share those with your community. And that's something we're focusing on. So I think all of these kind of relying on the community, looking at documents is how I kind of practically start learning about SaaS automation.
Yeah, I like that point too of like, hey, even if you don't come from like if you're not the best programmer, not the next best person with like APIs and perusing the documentation, going into the smaller details, there's plenty of solutions out there of like products that kind of take some of that hard work off for you and get you down those like good passive automation that a lot of their peers are doing, like tools like Better Cloud or If This and That or Zapier and kind of all those other platforms. So I want to segue to our next question. This was like a cool thought exercise, I thought, which was, what areas in SaaS and SaaS operations would you say can actually be automated, and which pieces could you say could not be automated?
I think that's a good question. I think if I was able to bucket some of these in a couple of different pieces, I would say I can put them into 4. I think the first one is kind of simple. When you think of applications, identifying those repetitive tasks, primary ones kind of comes to mind is user lifecycle management, because there's tons of users across the organization, and helping tie in those permissions, titles, groups, location could be key to automating those repetitive tasks, because someone joining a new company will at least have 80% of those things similar, and that last 20% is more granular. So I think that's kind of the first one, like identifying those repetitive tasks via the user lifecycle management piece. The second one would be more efficiency. I think someone mentioned on the chat as well, was identifying places where you could be more efficient with automation. So we typically see these incidents happen in our organizations where someone started sharing a file that was not supposed to be shared publicly. Someone's invited an external guest user to a Slack channel. Like, those are things that we as IT know that we need to remediate, but it would be more efficient if there was an automation tied to that. So that's kind of the second piece where you could quicken the efficiency or improve the efficiency to solve for those problems. The third one, I think, would be more insights-based. So think of problems that you're not able to see when you look at only 1, 2, 3 different sample sets. But when you're looking at a larger sample set, you can see a lot more things at the same time. So think of it as someone's using an application, and you're like, oh, this one person is using Excel instead of using Google Sheets. But now when you see it from a holistic organizational perspective, and if there was an automation that identifies and says, if more than 10 people are using Excel, I need to be notified so I can like look at potentially reducing spend or reducing the license counts across that application base. So I think that's kind of the third piece, where discovering insights into things you're using across the board could be a really good automation. And I think the fourth one is simple. I think people don't typically start thinking about it, but it's maintenance, kind of the regular service requests or keeping the lights on approach. Think of it as number of Slack channels that you might have that are not being leveraged. Slack does a really good job of informing the user in the channel saying, hey, I haven't seen any changes or updates from you in this channel. Do you want to remove it? That's a great automation that Slack has. And if you can tie that into other automations, would be beneficial. The other one is conference rooms, making sure that whenever someone is offboarded, we're freeing away those conference rooms so they can be available, helping reduce the strain or the mindless load for our employees and improve their work experience. So those are kind of the 4 pieces. One is like repetitive tasks or ULM, efficiency, insights-based, and maintenance, or kind of keeping the lights on. What do you think?
I think I agree with most of those topics. And like, I'll say just from my experience, like that's what we've been seeing in the field is a lot of our customers do request for a lot of help when it comes to offboarding automation, onboarding automation, furloughing, unfurloughing, keeping groups and roles and permission sets all within check across applications always seem to be those top of mind things. And I also love when like teams will go that extra mile deep and be like, well, wait a second, isn't there like this like HR handbook file that lives in our drive, and don't we share that out with everybody? And kind of doing that extra step of like, what else can we share from an asset standpoint that lives in all these SaaS tools? Those are some of my favorite like discovery moments that I think that happen in automation. It's just how granular can you actually get? One thing I will touch on is also just like things that I've seen that people want to automate, but they unfortunately can't automate. There's like one big technical thing, and then there's like a human thing. The technical thing I would say that I always see is like, I wish more providers posted more to their APIs and like an events stream kind of standpoint, because the more providers that could tell us about very key administrative events, that's more opportunities for a tool like BetterCloud to hook in and try to interpret those events and use that to leverage that data that lives in that payload that came from that one event to now go downstream and start talking to all these other application systems, whether it be creating users, disabling users, editing their attributes and things like that. And I know that's a big problem that everybody who talks to us is really trying to solve. So the more that our providers embrace these APIs and these events, I think the more that we could eventually do. And then the other thing that I'll say is, like, from a human touch standpoint, is there's still like your service desk and help desk and all your people at the end of the day still need to deliver high quality, white glove, very professional service to all of your end users, right? And part of that is giving that human touch, understanding where that trouble ticket or their problem ticket is coming from, you know, and really empathizing with that person. I think at the end of the day, you could automate all the processes you want to start the communications and start your data collection methods and start moving things around system. But at the end of the day, if there's a human interaction, it still has to stay human. And, you know, you want to know that there's somebody empathizing with your concerns, I feel like, at the end of the day. And that's just not something that I think robots are really good at doing. So at least not yet. Maybe prove me wrong someday. But as of right now, I still think that's still an element of where I think the human comes into automation and where we start to really blur the lines of that interface and what can and can't be automated. So cool. So I want to do another Zoom poll just to see where folks are in terms of SaaS automation. So I'm going to post a couple different polls around SaaS specifically. So I'm going to launch this poll question. So the question being, what areas of your SaaS universe do you feel you know the least about and automated? All right, see those answers coming
pretty
in.
Amazing results.
All right.
Oh, that quickly changed.
Let's see. Starting to see a leveling out between two categories. But yeah, no, I think we have a good spread here. So it looks like a lot of you answered application usage, but honestly, these are pretty close. I think everybody has a lot of areas of like wanting to understand what applications are my users using. That of course relates. I think that is very related to spend in some ways, but of course, like just understanding what is shadow IT and what kind of security permissions are also giving up, I think are part of that question. And then of course, with like asset permissions or people sharing things safely. So I think we have a really cool mix there. So I want to shift into a little bit more of a specific question around user management across your SaaS systems. So the question being, what user management area do you feel the least automated? And we've kind of broke it down into these couple categories, so take a minute to think about it and yeah, answer honestly. All right, I'm seeing one of these pull ahead.
Yeah, one of them is way ahead.
You need an all the above option. Yeah. That's so true. Cool. So I'm going to close this. So role change, promotions, transfers, management. I am excited to talk about this. I will mention how this is done in BetterCloud and some of the ways we've seen this been implemented. But yeah, I think it's good to see a good spread of these topics. I think there's always areas of improvement, the offboarding, onboarding, figuring out your licenses and keeping the directory clean. So I'll make sure we touch a little bit on role changes towards the end. And then I want to ask about a security, more security focused topic. So question being, what data protection area do you feel the least automated? So when it comes to your assets, are they, you know, are you caring about public shares, sensitive content, privileged account security? Where do you feel like you need more insight on? Awesome. Right, so for the sake of time, I'm going to end the poll. So it looks like we'll talk a little bit more about privileged account security, but again, I think all these topics are incredibly relevant, and we definitely want to share some best practices. So thank you for all this insight, because we'll shape some of our discussion around your responses. So let's move on to our next question.
Yeah, so I think based on all the feedback and the responses we got, I think we kind of helped identify some of the common trends. But want to open up the question of like, are there common trends in organizations that embrace automation? And what about ones that aren't? Like, what are your thoughts, Devin?
So I'll say there's like two big themes I see about companies that are embracing it mostly. It's that they're facing a scaling challenge is kind of number one, or number two, they're facing a compliance challenge. And I'd say for that number one of the scaling challenge, take a company that just got like their Series B funding and they're like, oh, we got to grow our company from 30 employees to 100 somehow. And we anticipate having to go through all this growth and change and potentially people even leaving. So I think these questions start coming up around, how am I going to start automating the management of my users across all my SaaS applications? So I'd say companies in the face of all this change, and especially given COVID now, I feel like there's a lot more change that we're unexpectedly dealing with than we've done before. So I'd say that those companies are more willing to embrace automations are the ones that have felt, hey, all this pain from all this manual process of moving back and forth between setting their users and their groups and their roles and permissions and whatever that may be across those applications. And then on the second side, I would say with compliance standards, I mean, ultimately, depending on your industry, you may be up against HIPAA, you may be against FCC, like SEC, you may be up against SOC to some extent, and that you have to keep certain processes standardized and uniform, just because you need to prove that you're keeping your customer data safe, your employee data safe, and that when people leave and join, like the rights and the access do follow the least privilege model as closely as they possibly can. And I think that those are really good signs of healthy companies that are really interested in those values and those core tenets of just, hey, we need to make sure that we have an automated process solving this problem for us, because the minute we start entering all these manual checklists of, did we offboard this, did we turn them off on this, and did we do onboard it, we introduce all these like points of human error. And we know that that's just something that we're looking to reduce, I think, over time. So organizations that are really feeling that pressure, but also just want to be ready to scale and be ready to keep data secure, I think are going to be the healthy markers of organizations that are embracing automation. Harit, what have you seen in your experience?
I think some of the points you touched on kind of like resonate well as well. I mean, like when I think about it, it's important to cover compliance and security and those small things, right? So I think automations take a lot of different forms when you look at different trends across smaller businesses or larger organizations. When you look at smaller businesses, I think the most important thing is repetition and finding ways to do something that adds value, and then figuring out a way to automate it to be more agile and reduce the number of staff that we have to grow with. When you look at larger organizations, I think the trend is more around broader, involving more processes, kind of like helping standardize some of the processes. I think some of the attendees mentioned that as well. Like one of the reasons that automation is critical is helping with consistency across the board for larger organizations. So those are kind of the common trends that I think of.
Agreed. So I guess our next question will be, what are the levels of automation you've seen, and kind of when do you think a company could say, we are fully automated?
That's a good question. I have a really good answer to the last one, but the first one, I think it depends on how people see automation. There could be different levels. There could definitely be automation where you have creation and deletion of users, and people think that's fully automated, right? But as you start kind of peeling the onion, you see there are additional layers to that. You could start adding details about groups or teams or distribution lists, shared mailboxes. To another layer, you could think about data transfer. Like when someone's being offboarded, instead of just deleting that account or suspending that account, think of another layer of automation where you're transferring that data, making sure it's secure, archiving it. And then when you think of those larger organizations where you have a global diversity in terms of sales departments in Germany and the US and Canada, most of the processes might be simple. But when you go at a more deeper level of automation, you want to make sure that those specific regions have their own unique processes in place, which is adding to that level of automation. And the last one, I think you kind of briefly touched on, which I don't think can be fully automated, but it is a level of automation where you're requiring an input from an end user, from in terms of like a wait for approval that we do at Better Cloud, where you're asking the end user saying, do you want this automation to continue or stop? And I think those are kind of key levels of automation. When you think about, like, additionally, I believe there's so many opportunities when you think of automation. And I honestly believe as technology improves, there will be more tasks that we will have to automate. And we're just seeing the first hints of automation across our digital workplaces or across SaaS applications.
Yeah, I like that point about just like when you start to peel back the layers and understand it goes kind of beyond just like, I just need to put a user in this one application and I'm done. I always feel like other layers to this problem that when they come up in a problem context, and I'll use actually one of the polls as an example of this, is this idea of like privilege account security, of like looking at your admins and your service accounts or your whale accounts, is like, you could write a policy and automate, you know, login rules around like certain network zones are approved for login, and you could have your IDP for enforcing that. You know, you could have Better Cloud just telling you, giving you an audit trail of like all of your successful and failed logins. But when you start to understand, well, let's look at the problem of logins in general. Are there more interesting logins than there are other ones? And I'm like, yes, there are. There's things like service accounts that you know that have admin permissions within certain applications that you really do need to control who has access to those service accounts. Even giving out admin permissions to your own end users is something that could be somewhat scary, because you know that's keys to the castle. And if you're, you know, hopefully, like, you know, your application audit logs things, but even Postgres, you kind of want to even prevent bad things happening with your admins where they did something they weren't supposed to do. And then this idea of like whale accounts, and whales, I mean like your C-suite. Like, you may be interested to see, being that these are very high value accounts that live within your systems, there's this extra problem of trying to understand how often are they maybe successfully or failing to log in. Are they doing it from very strange places, things like that, because you want to make sure that those accounts are most secure, because you know those carry the highest risk. And what's cool about Better Cloud is in our alert section, like, you do have the ability to add additional alert filters on things like your super admin counts exceeding threshold, successful logins within G Suite and Okta, where you could put filters on that look specifically for certain named accounts logging in. So one big use case that we solve for a lot is I want to look at my Google service accounts and see how they're logging in. So we usually put a filter condition that says a successful user login whenever my bettercloud.service or printer.service or automation service or whatever it may be logs in, goes just send an email out to one of the super administrators just letting them know, hey, somebody did actually log in and do some activity as this account. So it's good to just have those audit trails and have that visibility before you even realize you needed it in the first place. So
I think that's a good one. So maybe we tie that on to some automations that we have seen across Better Cloud customers, or maybe what do Better Cloud customers need to consider when making sure that the automations are going deeper? Do you have an idea that comes to mind?
I'll base this one off the poll results too, is I think a lot of people have started getting their feet wet in offboarding and onboarding, but they want to go that extra mile of how do I do role changes and promotions and things like that. And I've seen a handful of customers go that extra mile and start that layer of automation. And I think it's really deep and important, because what I've seen in these automations is effectively they'll hook into like an attribute change in Google as an example, and they'll see like a department change or a title change or something like that that actually represents that they moved on to another department or they changed their title. And they usually work with their human resources department to say, okay, this is our inventory of titles, this is our inventory departments. Please do not deviate from this list, because we're actually going to use this for downstream automation. And what happens is when they actually make those changes, is Better Cloud picks up on that signal and says, you know what, let's go remove them from all their current Google groups and let's start adding them to all the new ones as part of their new change and promotion. Let's start adding them and creating their user accounts in their new application. So take the example, somebody maybe who gets promoted to engineering, you know, we'll remove all the Google groups from their help desk days, let's just say, and then we'll add all the engineering based Google groups. And then what will happen is we'll create their AHA account, we'll create their PagerDuty account, we'll create their Datadog account and make sure that they're getting the correct role in those. The best cases where I've seen people really execute these workflows successfully is where they've data mapped and actually drew out this mind map of, hey, I entered engineering. What are the Google groups? What are the applications? What are the roles within those applications? And kind of drawing out your inventory is like the best way to approach this problem. And I've seen customers who've done that really get organized and really make sure that these role change and these promotion workflows, I think, work really well. Harit, curious what you've seen.
That's a good one. I think there's one that I can think of, which is not heavily used, but I do want to tie it to some of the poll results as well. One was around SaaS spend. So thinking about that, I think there's an alert in Better Cloud that helps you identify when someone has not logged in to a specific SaaS application. Let's say you can choose between 30, 60, 90, or anywhere between those timeframes, and kick off an alert and say, if someone is not logged in, give them a notice, send them an approval and say, hey, are you still using this app? If you're not, I'm gonna take your license away, archive your user, or suspend your user, or deactivate it, helping eventually like kind of scraping at it and like saving spend for the entire IT organization. So I think that would be a good win to kind of go deeper into helping save some spend on the IT side. I think that's all the questions that we had. With that, I want to quickly transfer over to our last poll. And this one's kind of tying back to the first one that we asked, which was where do you see yourselves when you think of automation? And I want to see if the discussions that we had, did that change your mind? Do you want to rescore yourself to kind of see if this helped? Awesome, we have about 25% of the votes in, giving it a few more seconds. But I like it. I think the trend has slightly changed. 2 more seconds, and I'm gonna end the poll. There we go. So it kind of looks like we were originally talking about people estimated themselves being in the 3, 4, 5 range. It looks like the numbers have slightly changed, moved on over to 6 and 7, which is a good sign. And I'm hoping we can get people to thinking more about the automations that they can start putting in, so everyone moves to that lower tier. Or the higher tier, sorry, not the lower tier.
Yeah, I'm glad our discussion is giving you a little bit more confidence in your automation abilities. So I think it's a shared pain thing amongst all of us, so totally understand.
Awesome. And with that, we'll kind of quickly talk about Altitude, which is our user conference that's really up and coming in October. I had the privilege of attending it last year and presenting. If you're able to, this is going to be a completely digital conference, considering the world that we live in. And we have some amazing announcements that we plan to roll out. There are going to be some key pieces around Automate as well. So I just wanted to kind of pitch that in out there. And if you haven't registered, please go ahead to Altitude and sign up. Looking forward to seeing you all there. And with that, I will kind of tie it off at the very end and see if people have questions that we can take.
Cool. So while you're writing in your questions, I'll take our first question that I see in the Q&A from Razi. Does BC have a plan of having the ability for customers to use their own APIs to allow their own API calls to automate tasks? The good news is, yes, we have an API. We have an inbound API in the form of being able to trigger workflows and actions from all these different SaaS providers that we integrate with them natively. But you also have the ability to use what we call our custom integrations in our API SKU, which effectively what that allows you to do is if you have your own integration that has like users or something like that that you want to orchestrate with, you would be able to make an outbound REST API call to it. We can, use basic authentication. We could use an API token. We could do some OAuth into it. And then effectively from there, we'll be able to orchestrate and talk to your REST API and, use that for actions in your workflows. So that way you can include it as offboarding, onboarding, role changes, promotions.
That was a good one. I see another one that came in. It says, what's the most impressive automation you have seen a Better Cloud customer build? Thinking about it, I've actually seen an automation that was like 400 steps in, and someone had 400, 500 different automations kicking off. So that's the deepest I've seen, which included about 30, 40 different applications. Have you seen anything like that, Devin, on any of your calls?
My favorites are the ones that like branch the workflows together to like chain and wait for approvals into like offboarding and onboarding processes. So they'll figure out ways how to like add people to different service groups to then start asking for permission from managers. Hey, do you actually want to transfer drive assets to me? And I've also seen some folks start to build in any other automation tools into the fray. So like I was talking with a customer yesterday that figured out how to use like Zapier to read Slack words and then use that to potentially even trigger a Better Cloud workflow. And I was just like impressed by the whole thing. So I think there's some really cool stuff you could do with our inbound API as well as the outbound too to really enhance this.
All right, I'll take the next one because it's more product focused. The question is, will or is Better Cloud integrated with Workday to allow for onboarding and offboarding automation? So a really good answer to that is we are looking at building that out and potentially rolling it out this year. So we're looking at identifying things and changes in Workday, taking those, orchestrating it across SaaS applications, and also having the ability to write certain things back into Workday. So that's going to be something that's exciting, and we're planning to go GA later this year. So this will be a key HR tie into automation with Better Cloud.
All right, and I'll take the next question from Patrick. Does BC have a solution for auditing free ULA type tools or extensions? So some exciting announcements to come soon. Can't really talk about them right now, but what I will say is we're looking into more functionality around discovering application installs in general, whether they're coming from, your OAuth or your SAML providers, just saying, hey, we've noticed somebody's installed this application. So we're looking into it.
That's a good way of answering it, Devin. I think the next one is any thoughts to update your Jira integration? It's very limited in its abilities and scope. That's a good call out. We've been looking into tying into a couple of different pieces in the Atlassian armada. So when you look at Atlassian Access, there's a couple of pieces in there like Trello, Jira Service Desk, Confluence. So we are working to expand into all of those. And that's one of our key integrations we're hoping to focus on. So if there are specific ones that you are looking for in Jira, like creating a ticket, updating a ticket, we would really appreciate if you shoot me an email. It's showing up on here, but also file it into our ideas portal, and I will take a note of that, Christopher.
All right. Question from Andrew. Do you work nicely with Jump Cloud and even SDWANS? So with Jump Cloud, I could say that is one of our supported integrations, and the way that we're treating it right now, we're treating it as a downstream application. I know we've heard some stories around like, hey, it'd be cool if that was more of our IDP and we could receive signals from it. But I'll say to date right now, the functionality that we have with Jump Cloud does relate to being able to create users, to unlock users, to delete their accounts, to remove their SSL token, SSL keys, and public SSH keys and things like that from the account. Things that you would normally do to try to start secure the account down before you offboard and onboard them. A little unfamiliar with what's meant by DWANS, and if there's like a specific application that comes to mind. But in general, like my rule of thumb is like with other third-party applications and our integrations, via our API, as long as we could talk to some user endpoint on that REST API for that outbound provider, I'd say we're going to have a pretty good time putting that into our workflows later on.
All right. I think we don't have any additional questions. Yeah, thank you. This was really helpful. And I echo what just Devin said is there's no way we can automate everything. We're just kind of scratching the surface of automation. And if you guys, or if anyone has new ideas from a product standpoint at Better Cloud, we're always open to ideas. And thank you all for dialing in and asking questions.
Yes, thank you. Oh, I love this comment. Can you turn the kettle on? I have these like little NFC tags. I'm going to start doing some home automation projects this week. So maybe we'll work on that. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Appreciate it and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.